You did spend a lot of time at the infamous Skinwalker Ranch.
What is your best guess at what's going on there?
Well, it's a precognitive sentient phenomenon. I had a telepathic contact with the black shadow that unfolded in a grove of trees at the old Pioneer homestead. Before that happened, just minutes before that happened, Colin and I witnessed a white orb hovering a yard above the ground.
What was this psychic connection to this black shadow like?
I was using the night vision binoculars to kind of search around. I'm looking for another orb. This dark spot appears and it starts growing in size, but it grows in size to envelope the canopy of this grove of trees. I want to move the binoculars away from my face, turn and tell Colin what I'm seeing. I'm frozen. I can't move a muscle. All I see is this black shadow. And the next thing I know, this incredibly loud, multiple metallic-like voices are in my head, pretty loud. And it says, "We are here, we are watching you." I interviewed Legacy Aerospace Corporation that no longer exists because it got absorbed by another one after the turn of the millennium. The executive administrative assistant of the crash-retrieval program that this company was contracted to run at an Air Force facility. And so she's in charge of security, in charge of the skiff. She oversees those guys, and she has access to the 6 or so intact UFO craft that her program received from the recovery team.
Eric Davis, it is safe to say, has one of the wildest resumes in physics. He's a man who worked on the Voyager missions, on advanced and theoretical propulsion, warp drives, wormholes, the quantum vacuum, zero-point energy, and then somehow found himself investigating UFOs, the high strangeness and paranormal activity at Skinwalker Ranch, and then later worked inside classified programs like AAWSAP, studying the phenomenon and trying to get to the bottom of the UFO legacy program. The novelty really starts ramping up for Davis in the 90s when he takes a job with NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, and he later worked closely with someone I've talked about many times on the channel, physicist Hal Puthoff, one of the founders of the infamous Project Stargate. And we are sincerely just scratching the veneer here. Go lurk his LinkedIn, look at his full CV. It's truly a thing to behold. In this one, we're going to get into what Eric found and experienced at Skinwalker Ranch, his time in the AAWSAP program, investigating the alleged classified crash retrieval programs, what he says the government and select defense contractors actually know about UFOs and the phenomenon. One more thing before we launch into this. Late in the conversation, the last maybe 50, 45 minutes or so, we start deep diving this topic of the legacy program, crash retrievals, some companies and people that Eric was directly involved with. He asked me not to name these companies or this person, although I do know who they are, and many of you probably will too, based on the context, maybe even based on things he said in previous interviews. I'm going to respect his wishes. I did remove the name he asked me to remove throughout the duration of this podcast. At least I think I did, because he said it a lot of times, and I did try to go in silence or cut all of those out. That said, many of you are going to know who this person is. I talk about them in other videos. Other, even bigger people on this platform talk about this person as well. I'm sure he will come up again in future conversations, but for this one, I am respecting Eric's wishes not to name him, so apologies if anyone finds that annoying. And with that, let's get into it. Smash the buttons and stuff. Hope you enjoy.
I think to me, and most people watching, they look at you and they go, "Oh, this guy's an insider. He's seen this stuff. He's been inside classified programs. He knows things." You're around AAWSAP. You're around Hal Puthoff and Bigelow and all of these things, Skinwalker Ranch.
I'm only an insider insofar as my exposure to the classified DIA program was concerned, in that I was given eligibility for access and need to know for the classified programs that we were going to be dealing with at the AAWSAP. And this also included my being deputized by DIA program manager Jim Lackatski
Mm-hmm.
to represent the DIA. So I have the authority of my security clearances and the DIA to knock on doors and say, haha, I have an on good word that you've got something I need to see, I have need to know. Here's my letter, here's my security clearance courier card and all that good stuff. And unfortunately, it got me access to some things, mostly people, data, but not the craft themselves or NHI bodies or who it is that's had contact with NHIs in the government. I did get a chunk of that or a piece of it from foreign intelligence and not related to an American recovery, but a foreign government's recovery of a downed UAP craft that involved NHI bodies that were recovered along with it. So this is reports that were collected by the United States government. And they wanted an outside independent scientist who has exposure to the field, who's worked in it for decades, who's got a PhD, and I have a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Arizona, and I worked on space missions as part of my graduate program, and so they wanted to leverage my experience working for Bob Bigelow at NIDS and leverage working for the AAWSAP.
Yeah,
and so I'm a good discriminator of BS versus ground truth.
Yeah,
and I've been around it for so long, I can tell BS from ground truth.
Well, before we go super deep into specific anecdotes, I thought it'd be cool to start out with just a few kind of high level questions on things that, you said you've got a great BS detector. You've been in this for more
30
than
30 years last month.
30 years at this point. So let's start with a few easy true or false questions. There is a classified crash retrieval program.
True.
We have crafts and bodies in facilities somewhere.
True.
Humanity has been in touch with multiple kinds of non-human intelligence for many years.
True.
Are you yourself, Eric, an experiencer of any kind?
Yes. True.
Really? Okay. Well, I want to get deeper into all of these things, but a couple more of these quick questions. Do you think consciousness is deeply involved with the phenomenon?
Yeah, it plays a role.
Do you think this conversation goes to a spiritual dimension?
I'm not a religious studies expert, so I think, for example, my lecture at the Contact in the Desert 2026 in Indian Wells, which is Palm Springs, California, I discussed the evolution of the human brain, and one of the pieces of the human brain is the limbic system. And the limbic system is responsible, according to the experts who've studied it for decades, is responsible for our religious experience. So if we get an ontological shock, we're confronted by something that we can't explain normally within our traditions and culture of our upbringing, then that limbic system is going to want to overlay a religious explanation or a religious meaning to that experience. Okay, so it's not that there's a spiritual, it's that our brain wants to make it a spiritual.
Okay.
So it's the other way around, and I think the NHIs know this very well. And I've seen examples like in Wonders of the Sky by Chris Auerbach and Jacques Vallée. There's a lot of religious overtones that come out of the UAP encounters with mankind in Europe during the 1500 plus year period that their study covers.
Yeah.
So I think it's played a role in that. I think the phenomenon has understood our religious overtones in our culture, or the religious overtones in our culture. And I think it has played it up pretty well.
Okay.
And the miracle, the Fatima miracles in Portugal, back after the turn of the 20th century, was an example of that, where you had one event where these children that are encountering the Virgin Mary over a burning bush out in a field. These kids are illiterate. They don't go to school. They're poor. They're children of farmers, and they're running their sheep out there or whatever farm animals, and they're encountering this vision that's giving them prophecies. And it's, I think, a couple of cousins or something. And so they're getting these prophecies, which does fast forward of the story. The Vatican investigated, and the prophecies came true. And I think there was one last one that hadn't come true. I don't know if it has come true yet or if it's yet to come true. I think it had to do with Pope Benedict being replaced by Pope Francis or something like that. That might not be the right prophecy, but the Vatican held on.
I need to
the
look deeper
Vatican,
into that.
it specifically held on to that prophecy and kept it a secret. The other prophecies it kept a secret until they came true, and then they revealed it.
Well, that's convenient, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so here we have an event where I guess the word of mouth spread far and wide in the community, outside the farm, outside the agrarian community that these kids were living in, and it got to the local city. And so they had approximately hundreds to 1,000 some witnesses to this next appearance of the phenomenon that the kids predicted was going to happen. So the kids are there, and several very religious, very lowly educated, poor people that work in the community or work in the agricultural area, they go to church. They're very religious and devout. They saw the Virgin Mary appear over a burning bush. And this is the type of burning bush as described by Jacques Vallée and people who've studied the miracles have said, to me, reminds me of the burning bush that Moses saw. Okay, up in Mount Ararat. And so they saw that, and the more educated people from the town, like the city leaders, the law enforcement leaders, or law enforcement personnel, town engineers, school teachers, doctors, and so forth, they didn't see the Virgin Mary over the burning bush. What they saw, what looked like the sun, was be fantastically brilliant white instead of its normal color of yellow in the sky. And it was a bit larger in size, and it started making motions across the sky. And the sun was nowhere in the sky at that point. It's just this thing that looks like it's illuminating the sky, creating daylight. And it's moving around, but there's no sight of the sun itself. And that's what they saw. Okay.
So there was a genuine phenomenon of some kind, but it seems like that the Mary aspect of it was the sort of later cultural overlay that was.
And that's right. And this is where the consciousness aspect comes. I think it was manipulating the consciousness of the percipients. So the very religious percipients saw it as Virgin Mary hovering over a burning bush. And everybody who's very religious is hearing its message, I think telepathically. And all the educated, highly educated technical people or technically oriented people are seeing a silver disc move across the sky. And you don't see the sun anymore for some reason.
Yeah. It's a fascinating case. I want to get into your story specifically because I always know like the chunks, some of the like major chapters, but I don't know if I know specifically when things went from, prosaic kinds of, physics work to you getting pulled in to the weird stuff and the big questions. When did that first start? How did you end up getting pulled into some of these more phenomena-related projects for the first time?
Yeah, I was working at the 8th Fighter Wing in Tucson, South Korea. That was the U.S. Air Force forwarded deployed air base. And Tucson is on the southwest Korean peninsula on the coast of the Yellow Sea. And so I was there for a long while, and my wife and I have 3 little kids, and she's alone with the 3 kids. She's got help from her family, and I'm in South Korea working. And it was getting to be hard to be away from my family. And I had my son was still a baby, but he was just to think about it, he was not quite 2 years old. He was almost 2 years old. So I was missing his milestones in life. And I'm kind of looking at the pay situation, and it's not all that great for what it should have been for the position I had. And I was working for the University of Maryland in their overseas program. So I'm going to be coming home for the summer because I'm teaching over there. And what happens is they don't guarantee summer teaching courses. And so I had none that could be assigned to me. And that means I couldn't pay my bills. I couldn't be able to send money to my wife to help her pay the bills. So I was looking at a summer with no money to spend and my wife not earning any income. Now she's working full time plus a part-time job, and that would have been too big of a burden. Plus I'd not have any health insurance at that point because I'd be off salary. So I looked through my May issue of Physics Today magazine, and there was a whole page ad in the career section by NIDS.
Wow.
The National Institute for Discovery Science was looking for scientists in a category of STEM fields, and they were looking into studying questions of cosmology and intelligence throughout the universe, this and that. I don't remember the verbiage anymore. It's so long ago. And I thought, wow, this sounds like what I'm really interested in. So I got back. I applied for the job from Korea before it was time for me to go home for the summer. And I was still teaching the end of the classes and had to give final exams. So I got the email address, typed up a cover letter, got my resume put together, and I emailed it to the address in the ad. And that email went to John Alexander.
Wow.
And so John Alexander got my CV, my cover letter, printed it out. He put me in touch with Hal Puthoff because he read my CV and he said, oh my God, you're interested in quantum vacuum fluctuations and ZPE. And that's the stuff that one of our Science Advisory Board members is big on. That's his primary research interest. So he said, I want to put the two of you together. So we introduced us by email. I'm using my Air Force email, and they're emailing me back and forth from Hal's in Austin and John's in Las Vegas working for Bob Bigelow at NIDS. And so we're emailing back and forth. And then I told John and Hal that I'm leaving for the summer because there's been no guaranteed teaching assignments, so I have no income and I need to go home and find another job in order to earn income until I find a full-time job. And John said, well, let us know when you're back. Let's pick up this conversation. So that happened. I called John when I got back to Tucson, and John scheduled an interview with me. So he interviewed me for a long period of time on the phone. And then he said, I want to talk to Mr. Bigelow about you and show him your CV. So during that period of time, this is in June of 96. So during that period of time, he started calling my references. And those are my old dissertation advisors on my PhD committee at the University of Arizona. And one of whom was my boss as well. I worked on the Voyager 1 and 2 missions with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was his PhD student, and my dissertation research was on the Io plasma torus at Jupiter. And so I was doing a major plasma physics modeling aspect of that. And so he called all of these people who were on my reference list. They confirmed and verified who I was and what I did, and made recommendations about my attested to my character and background and whatnot. Whatever questions John had to ask, they answered. And so then the next thing I got a call from John saying that Bob Bigelow wants to interview me. So he just said, just hang on. He's going to call you at such and such time.
Yeah.
That happened. Bob was in his car. He had a car phone. So he interviewed me from his car, and I'm thinking that's funny because we've been on this phone 2 hours, and it didn't sound like he stopped somewhere, got out of the car, because he's on the phone in the car. I don't know if he had back in those days, we didn't have cell phones.
The big box one in the car. Yeah.
So it sounded like he might have been driving around Las Vegas for 2 hours interviewing me. That's my thinking. So we had a great conversation, and Bob invited me up to Vegas for the in-person interview.
Cool.
So I did that, and I got hired.
And that explains how you get pulled into the weird stuff, because if you get into the orbit of Hal Puthoff, John Alexander, Bigelow, you're immediately kind of thrust in to the fun and weird and wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
Let's give people an idea of who they are and what their backgrounds are, because that in and of itself kind of speaks to a lot of what you're going to investigate later, right? Because Hal Puthoff is known as not just a physicist, but he co-ran Project Stargate for any number of agencies. I know it started with CIA and then kind of went through various
the remote viewing program.
Yeah, the remote viewing program, studying various psi phenomena, but really it's become broadly known as the remote viewing program.
Right. It had a lot of different code names. That's why.
Yeah.
Stargate, Grill Flame, Sunstreak, this, that, and the other thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
And then John Alexander was involved.
He was when it went to the Army Intelligence and Security Command. He was the chief of staff to Brigadier General Bert Stubblebine, who was the commander of INSCOM.
Yes.
So it landed there, landed at the DIA, the Air Force. Dr. Dale Graff was a missiles physicist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he got the program after the CIA. So it went to his office in the 70s after the CIA gave it up. And then after that, I think it went to the DIA, and then after that, the Army. And then it went back to the CIA in the end for another number of years until Bill Clinton declassified it.
Side question, just for my own personal interest. How did Dale Graff and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base get involved with that? Because I know that there is there's longstanding, obviously, rumors about Wright-Patterson and crash retrieval, and that's where McCaslin was, who has become very central to the UFO conversation. There's also this human performance wing or something like that that's there, and if you just look at their public-facing boilerplate, it's all very kind of vague but interesting sounding stuff about fringe case medical studies, but it also makes one wonder if maybe within the bracket of human performance there's psi-related stuff that's been going on for years there. And if, I can only speculate, and I'm assuming you can only speculate, but do you have any insight on that? I really don't know that
history part of it. I just know that Dale was working on missile technology, and that was his area of responsibility. And I don't know how he got into the remote viewing program and what moved him into that path. And I don't know if the human performance was actually, I know there's the human performance lab is in New Mexico in modern times, but I don't know what was going on in the mid to late 70s with regard to that topic.
Well, even now, if you just go to the website of that, whatever, I'm probably not saying the exact correct, name of whatever this segment at Wright-Patterson is, but there's a lot of medical related stuff. And interestingly, there's a lot of combinations between aerospace and outer space and very fringe type medical stuff where it sounds like they're talking about doing medicine in outer space, essentially. Well, yeah.
Friends, I have been cooking up the goods over in the members section on YouTube and at patreon.com/third eye drops. What are said goods, and was cooking really the best verb you could summon on this occasion? Well, to the former question, said goods are weekly, at least roughly, exclusive content that you are never going to see here on the main feed, with some of your favorite guests, by the way. Case in point, I am slowly working on a doc that I shot at Contact in the Desert this year with a number of your favorite beings on the topic of UFOs and consciousness, and I will be releasing the full unedited conversations with all of those people only on the members channel and on Patreon. If you do join up over at patreon.com/third eye drops, you will get access to all of those exclusive videos, plus a patron-only Discord and occasional live hangs and more. And yes, of course, the doc will be coming out on the main feed if I didn't make that clear. So much love for watching, my friends. While I have you, tickle that algorithm, like, subscribe, review if you are listening on Spotify.
Where it sounds like they're talking about doing medicine in outer space, essentially.
Well, that's aerospace medicine actually was born after World War II. And the first aerospace medicine laboratory was established by a guy named Lovelace, I think it was, in New Mexico. So that's not unusual because that was the period when the Air Force was starting to push jet fighter technology to the limits, and then simultaneously manned balloon flights to higher and higher altitudes until they reached near space. Near space is 100 miles altitude above sea level.
Okay,
and so they're creating an environmental, pressurized environmental habitat, attach it to these powerful balloons, and they send up and see how far they can get their astronaut. This was the pre-space age. This was leading. They were trying to explore what the physiology effects of that kind of altitude of flying.
G-forces.
The environment up there, the whole thing. What kind of effects did it have on astronauts? And actually, the guys doing that were pilots, were just Air Force pilots. So there weren't even astronauts then, but they became the first astronauts, technically. And so that was the year when this was starting to emerge, was after World War II ended. And it continued evolving throughout the 50s. And then finally, as you know, we had the manned space program start in the early 60s.
So we've established, you know, you get pulled into NIDS. You're working with Hal Puthoff. You're working with John Alexander. Bigelow himself, like to this day, is a huge champion of disclosure, investigating a lot of different kinds of high weirdness, phenomena-related things. Spent a lot of time researching what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch. He just put out that interview with George Knapp recently where, he, you know, so he's to this day, like since then and before, and even to this day is deeply involved with investigating these questions. So you get pulled into NIDS. What happens from there? What do you start investigating? What kind of things start landing on your plate?
Well, I was there in mid-July, started my job in the middle of the month on a Monday. And we had a science advisory board meeting that month, either the weekend after or 2 weekends after. Then the other two NIDS scientists got hired and started that particular week later in July. And that would have been Colin Kelleher and George Onett. So they came on board. All Bob was doing was having us work in the executive office suite outside of his executive office. And this is really like an open air area on the top floor. It's a second floor park house on Southeastern Avenue in Las Vegas. And you have all these office desks everywhere. And the boardroom is over here. There are some closed off offices down this way. So he's got a real estate office, his lawyer's office, and general contracting office, and then his executive suite. Okay. And then, and so we're just, he's just getting us acclimated at that time in July and getting us used to processes and procedures, payroll, vacation time, meeting with his administrative assistants. And he doesn't really get us started on anything except he suggests we read Linda Howe's books, Jacques Vallée's books. And then we find out there's an office on East Tropicana called, and that's where John Alexander is. So that's actually where I went during my job interview. John took me from Bob's office to the NIDS office, and he showed me around. And so there was a separate NIDS. There was an actual NIDS office, but Bob, for the first half of the year, had us working in the executive office area outside the boardroom, just a little ways down from his executive suite. And so he wanted us there, and I think that was because he wanted to keep an eye on us and engage us, because what he does is he parks his car under this. This is not a this floor doesn't have a ground floor beneath it. That's the parking area for him and his wife and maybe a couple of other executives. So he comes in and parks under our floor. Then he takes an elevator up to the second floor, and he'll go through that and say hello to us, and he'll want to talk to us as he comes and as he goes, and just engage in chit chat with us and stuff, and maybe give us something to think about, or maybe have us call some people to talk to and whatnot.
Did it surprise you at all that, you know, you take this job and then one of the first things is read these UFO books, essentially? Like, was that surprising to you?
But I had read UFO books when I was in middle school. Okay. And then got to high school, and that kind of fell off the map. And got to college and graduate school after that, and that really was off the map. And I didn't forget about it. I just hadn't read any more books. So I read Alan Hynek's book, and I read 2 of Jacques Vallée's books, one with Hynek, and the APRO newsletters, because I subscribed to them when I was in middle school, and and they're in Tucson. I grew up in Phoenix. Okay. So let's see, what else? Oh, I would see the occasional UFO documentary on TV that was on TV every once in a while. There was the Emenegger documentary in '74. Then he reissued it 3 years later with an update that involved Jacques Vallée and cattle mutilations. Saw that. Then there'd be Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of series, and this and that and the other. So I had my foothold in UFO subjects starting since the beginning of middle school. There were plenty of science news magazines, which is for the lay persons. They're an extension of Science magazine, which is technical. There was Scientific American magazines that they had on subscription, so I would read a lot of that.
And
And,
early on, they were actively exploring what today we would call like very alternative physics and propulsion modalities, right? Because I'm assuming like,
not to the
okay,
extent you think. The propulsion was advanced. It was like nuclear fusion,
okay.
nuclear fission, laser propulsion, not necessarily sails, but rockets that are powered by laser beams projected to the rocket to heat up a propellant. And
Was it more like the 50s that they were talking about, like speculating about G drives and gravitational type
in the
electrogravitic
50s,
stuff?
A couple of the aerospace companies, Glenn Martin was one. I'm trying to think. Oh, Travis Taylor's got a list of them, and I got a
Yeah,
newspaper
that's
clipping.
okay.
Yeah, but
Just
anyway,
an aside
there
for
were
now.
probably 2 or 3 or 4 aerospace corporations that established what I'll euphemistically say gravity control / anti-gravity foundations. And they hired the best physicist to run those foundations, and the whole purpose of what they were looking at was studying the current laws of the current physics, and the current physics at that time would have been general relativity theory, and quantum field theory was still not quite fully emerging in the 50s. Its foundation was quantum electrodynamics theory, which won Richard Feynman the Nobel Prize in physics for him. So he quantized Maxwell's electrodynamics, and that was the first part of quantum field theory. But quantum field theory is much broader than quantum electrodynamics, and so nobody was thinking about the weak force, the strong force of nuclear physics, and radioactive decay. Turns out radioactive decay is a manifestation of weak nuclear force.
Okay.
And then in the 1970s, a bunch of guys, Steven Weinberg at UT Austin, and Abdus-Salam and maybe one other one, got the Nobel Prize in Physics for unifying electrodynamics with the weak nuclear force.
Wow.
They're two sides of the same unified force, two sides of the same coin. And sometime after the universe was born, it went through a symmetry breaking phase where the symmetry of those two forces has been broken, and they became two independent forces.
Okay.
And it turned out that the weak nuclear force is what gives you radioactive decay and the change of elementary particle flavor, some of them from one type to another. And we see that in neutrinos now. When they fly to the Earth from the sun, they change from one type of neutrino that they're emitted as, and they become a different type of neutrino before they hit our neutrino detectors on Earth. Okay.
I don't want to get too into the weeds on this because most people aren't going to follow.
So back in the gravity control anti-gravity era, they were looking for ways in the laws of physics and in the theories of physics contemporary to the 50s, whether there was a technological way to control gravity and produce things like anti-gravity, to produce revolutionary innovations in aerospace or space exploration propulsion. And unfortunately, they were not successful, but they did know that general relativity does give you the theoretical proof of principle recipes, as I call them, the solutions for anti-gravity. It's just that the numbers look horrible. Okay. And that means, my former mentor at Hughes Research Labs in Malibu, California, that was Robert Forward. And Robert Forward got his PhD in general relativity theory under the supervision of Professor Joseph Weber at the University of Maryland during the late 50s. And his work was on the gravitational wave detector. So they built the world's first gravitational wave detector. They detected signals, but they couldn't rule out noise in the system. And so it's now, I think it's being displayed at the Smithsonian Museum somewhere in Washington, D.C.
Fascinating.
So that was pretty revolutionary, even though it didn't have any definitive detection of a gravitational wave or any number of waves. So anyway, he explored all this, gravity control, anti-gravity, and he published peer-reviewed papers on the topic. And he gave us some engineering blueprints on how that can be done. Yeah. The problem is when you put the numbers from general relativity in there, you find out that you need stupendously huge devices with white dwarf density stellar matter moving in a poloidal winding around a giant torus, and they have to move at half the speed of light in order to create just a 1G of anti-gravity force to nullify the Earth's gravity.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds like a problem. And I'm not nearly as deep on this as someone like our mutual friend Jesse, or other people who have gone down this rabbit hole. I just thought I'd ask as an aside, but I do want to get back to your time at NIDS and when you start doing some of this work that has now kind of you become known for doing. So what's like the first major sort of big project or question that falls
Well,
to you
it
there?
happened in August of 96. That's when I think before that time or around that time, Bob Bigelow started getting news from Shelley Wadsworth in Pioche, Nevada, which is close to Wendover, and Wendover's on the border of Utah and Nevada.
Mhm.
And she's reading the Deseret newspaper, found out that a reporter named Zach Van Eyck had been reporting on the Sherman family's
Mhm.
horrific paranormal and UFO and cattle mutilation experiences on their ranch in Fort Duchesne, Utah, which is in the Uinta Valley on the northeast corner of the state below the Wyoming border. And that's where all the dinosaur
Oh, interesting.
digging sites are. And they've got the major dinosaur museum out there. So, and so he's reading about it. And then the next thing I know, I get called in to Bob's office, and he wants me to sit on and listen to him talk to Terry Sherman on speakerphone. And so we engaged in a long conversation for Terry to summarize all the events that happened to him and his family on that ranch from the day they bought it and stepped foot on it and started living there and breeding Black Angus cattle.
And this is Skinwalker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't call it Skinwalker then. We called it. It was just the Sherman family ranch. And so I listened to that, and I heard that the conversation took a turn toward, so things are terrible. Your wife is his wife was a loan officer at the bank in Ballard, I believe it was, which is nearby the ranch. And she's getting pressured at work, taunted. Their two kids in school were getting taunted and bullied. And I don't remember him saying that he was having difficulties himself, but his wife and kids were taking the brunt of all the news that Zach Van Eyck was reporting in the Deseret newspaper. So the conversation turned toward, well, what do you think about selling that to me?
Mm.
This is Bob speaking.
Yeah.
And that conversation took off. And the next thing I know, they say goodbye on the phone. And now we're in August, or sometime in August. I guess we were in August for that whole period of time. Bob gets back to us, and he says to us, the three of us, George, Colum, and I, and he says, I'm buying a ranch in Fort Duchesne, Utah, and we're going to take a trip out there next month in September of 96. And I'm going to take you guys out there, and this will be our trip out there to explore this property. And he gave us copies of Zach Van Eyck's articles for us to read and kind of prepare ourselves for what is going on.
Wow.
Okay, so he had bought the ranch.
So what kind of things are reported in these articles that are supposedly going on?
Well, it's the various things you probably are already familiar with. They had like
poltergeist.
They had like a dire wolf type creature. I think it was 5 or 6 feet tall at its shoulders when it stood on all fours. It could walk bipedally. It encountered the group of the family. That would have been Terry, his wife and kids, and probably his father and mother, or her father and mother. I'm not sure about that detail at this time. It's been so long ago since I've read those newspaper articles. But they saw this thing come up to them. They froze in fear. They kind of they had to take a relaxed, calm attitude so that the animal wouldn't perceive they were fearing it, because they didn't want to be attacked.
Yeah.
They were scared to death. So this animal's walking around, sniffing among them and looking around, and it didn't do anything to them. The next thing they know, it just walks away, gets on hind legs, walks off, and on 2 legs, and becomes semi-transparent.
Wow.
And just vanished off into the woods. And then there was an episode where they had a missing tool. There was an argument with Terry's son, Terrell. There was an important tool that he was used. I think it had to do with fixing a broken barbed wire fence. The tool went missing, and Terrell's not been known to be irresponsible, but Terry was irate about it. So they had to have everybody looking for this tool. And so everybody's out there looking for the tool, and they can't find it. I think the next thing they know, somebody turns around, and there it is. And I mean, it's right there in plain view, right where they were looking. So they had a couple cattle mutilations. They had 3 shepherd dogs, which are highly trained, bred shepherd dogs that are also hunting dogs, that chased after a UFO on the ranch. And to make a long story short, Terry had to go off and chasing the dogs. The dogs chased the phenomenon. I think it went around a bend from the far pasture to go behind a grove of trees, heading toward a big kind of a crevice where there's a creek running through the bottom of it. And he didn't see any sign of the dogs anymore and didn't hear anything from them anymore.
No.
He came across an open area with 3 freshly made piles of dark mottled ashes, and it looked like the colors of the dog's fur.
Man.
So he thought that the dogs had been reduced to ashes by the phenomenon.
It would be war for me at that point.
Yeah, and I don't remember if he told us what he smelled. I think there was a smell. He might have seen some smoke or something. I'm vague on that. But I strongly remember that right close together, 3 big, 3 mounds where the dogs would have been. Maybe he didn't see what happened to them, but he was sure that was the dogs, because they could never find them again.
Man, so you're reading all this stuff before you even,
and that's not unusual, and that's an unusual thing. He's never seen that before.
Okay.
It looked like they had been set aflame and reduced to ashes.
Yeah.
But yet
Very
the
conspicuous.
color was similar. Maybe the fur didn't all burn or something.
So you're reading all this, a man of science. What are you thinking at this point? Are you like,
I'm thinking this is far beyond the UFO that my wife and I saw in Tucson in May of '89.
And I didn't hear that story.
Because that was my first experience.
Okay.
And that had nothing to do with this. I'm in graduate school.
Okay.
I'm just 7 months from finishing my PhD dissertation and getting it turned in so I can schedule my oral defense in 1990. And so I'm at a party with my wife, and we see a triangular shaped, a boomerang shaped UFO craft, black, in the late afternoon in the sky below traffic pattern altitude. And I have a private pilot's license, and I used to fly my plane all around Tucson.
Okay.
And so I know what the traffic pattern altitude is. I'm familiar with all the altitudes all the way until you land on the runway. And so this was below traffic pattern altitude, definitely below the altitude of, it would be at and below the altitude of police helicopters. So it was at that altitude, and it was just hovering and turning so that the rear side of it, the inset, was facing me, and the nose of it was facing in the opposite direction, roughly southeast from my position. I'm up in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains. My wife and I were at a pool party that my dissertation supervisor was having that day. I think it was a Saturday. And she's on the other side of the pool talking with all the wives and girlfriends. I'm with all the postdocs, grad students, undergraduate students, and we all work for my boss on the Voyager 2 and Voyager 1 ultraviolet spectrometer experiment. And I'm the one doing my dissertation on the Ioplasma torus at Jupiter. One of the postdocs was doing the same thing. His girlfriend, future wife, was an astronomer. She was working on her PhD in astronomy and doing stellar studies. And I know the other folks were lab technicians, married, single. We had a mix of people. Not a single one of them saw it except my wife.
Wow.
So she's on the other side of the pool at a table with all the women, and I'm with most of the guys, and they didn't see anything. And I didn't find out until we were driving home that she saw something, because she asked me about it. And
How big was it? How big was it?
My estimate was it was probably the wingspan of two I think F-14 Tomcats with the wings extended.
Okay.
And I don't know what that wingspan is.
So it's like a double a fighter jet, basically.
Yeah, double a fighter jet.
So knowing what you know now, do you think that was a human UFO, like experimental craft, something going on? Or
No. This thing was mostly hovering.
Wow. Okay.
It wasn't a balloon either. And so it was mostly hovering, plus black color doesn't work, especially for experimental aircraft that of a military type. So it's rotating and slowly ascending. And I mean, it's ascending slower than I would ascend my Beach Skipper or my Grumman AA-5A or AA-5B, whichever one of those three I was renting at the time. When I'm in the traffic pattern altitude and I'm ascending up to a higher altitude to either avoid traffic or leave or whatever I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're ascending at well over 100, up around 150 knots. This thing was not ascending very fast. It was more like a crawl. And
almost
it was
sounds
also
like an airship
rotating.
or something.
Huh?
It almost sounds like an airship or something.
Well, we don't have airships shaped like that.
No, we don't. We don't. Yes, but yeah.
But not the military either. They
Right.
didn't have airships like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other part of this is I see this UFO from the back patio. My supervisor, my dissertation supervisor, has this really large patio area. It goes in one direction toward the pool, and then in the other direction on the back side of the house. So we're on the side of the house, and the pool goes around to the back side of the house. So we're on the side of the house, not the back.
Mm-hmm.
We would be on the east side of the house. So I asked the guys at my table, wow, I just saw this thing. Did you see it? And they said, what are you talking about? I described what it was, a black boomerang-shaped object, and it was rotating clockwise, and its nose was starting to incline upward. Pitch upwards is what we call it. And it was slowly ascending up during our conversation. And they said, oh, no, that was a police helicopter.
And you're like,
my wife's oldest brother was a cop
mm-hmm.
on the Tucson Police Department. He was actually in internal affairs. And I've seen their police helicopter many times, both that with my own eyes and coming and going from the airport. And I've seen it in the newspaper. It is not black and it is not boomerang shaped.
Right.
It's kind of a cream colored with Tucson Police Department logo on it and its own color scheme. But overall, it's got a cream colored cover. Cream colored cover on the fuselage.
Interesting.
So anyway, this thing did not have a fuselage. It did not have external aerodynamic control surfaces. Although, like I said, it's shaped like a boomerang. But you couldn't see jet engine intake or exhaust, or the jet engine being mounted below the boomerang structure. There was no rocket engine exhaust. You couldn't see a jet exhaust. You couldn't see a rocket engine exhaust. You couldn't see anything. It didn't have any observable propulsion system consistent with aviation, either jet engine. Oh, no propellers too. This thing had no propeller on it. You couldn't hear a noise coming from it. And it had no aviation lights on it, which are mandatory. So it had no right green light, left red light, headlight. You don't usually run your headlights in the middle of the day. And there's no strobe on it. Like on the tail, at the back of the empennage where you have the rudder and the aileron, on top of the rudder, you'll have a strobe. And you might have a strobe in the middle of the fuselage. And nothing. It was absolutely without light. So it's climbing up. And then finally, the sun is the terminator of the sky, because the sun is now setting in the west sky behind the Tucson mountains. The Terminator is going across the sky while we're all bullshitting about planetary and stellar physics and things that we're all doing on our dissertations. This thing is just keeps going up and up, and now it's inclining even further. I can see more of the top of this thing, and it's still looking like a boomerang shape. And then suddenly 4 large square lights came on that back inset. And red, blue, green, and yellow in that order. And it was weird because they were square, perfectly square, next to each other, and they filled that space in the back of the boomerang. And they came on. Dark started falling as we're going on into the evening, And this thing has gotten very high up. It's, I think it's well above 10,000 feet. Probably heading toward 15 by then.
So you're not mentioning this to anyone else as you're seeing it?
No, they laughed at me when I asked them during daytime, and they said, no, that was a police helicopter flying around.
But while you're seeing it, you're not like, what is that? What is this thing over here?
No, I'm just staring at it. I'm just captivated by it.
How long did the whole thing last?
Oh, God, half an hour.
Whoa, wow, that's a long time.
So it got up really high. It probably could have been heading toward 20,000 feet. The lights went off. Those big square lights just went off, and the blackness of this thing blended in with the darkening sky, and I couldn't see it anymore.
Wow. Crazy.
These guys are all talking and going on, so they've already told me it's a helicopter. I'm not going to bug them again. I did try to say, turn around and look at it, and they wouldn't do it.
Wow. Wow. Do you think that could be part of the phenomena, or is it just everybody so socially distracted, or does this strike you as part of
It's hard to tell.
the mental aspect of how these things happen? Because you hear these stories that these things can almost self-camouflage themselves through people just not acknowledging that it's there, you know, or appearing like something prosaic, but then to some people it looks very strange, but to other people it looks something normal, like a helicopter.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of the two, but probably more of the social engagement going on at the time. Everybody was too busy chatting about their next paper they're going to give an oral presentation on at the Geophysical Union meeting, or the American Physical Society meeting, or the American Astronomical Society meeting, and what grade they got on their PhD prelim exams, and if they're going to go on and take the oral exam or not, et cetera, et cetera. So I think everybody was busy with that. I don't think they were going to give me any credence for what I pointed out to them. Wow. They already made up their mind it was a helicopter. And as the evening started emerging, this thing got farther away, and I was not able to keep my eyes on it, because when those these lights were bright like neon, like Las Vegas neon lights, probably even more brilliant. I would think they would be more consistent with really brilliant LED lights of today, not the gas neon lights.
Okay.
So they were brilliant, and it's like they stood out, so I was able to see this thing until those lights went out. I could barely see anything left of that thing, and it just kind of blended into the darkness, and I lost track of it.
Wow.
So I think they were preoccupied. Nobody, I don't know, it just seemed like it grabbed their attention. Maybe we better turn around and look and see what Eric sees, and they didn't do that. They said they heard a helicopter, and somebody said, oh, yeah, that was the police helicopter. And the first person said, oh, yeah, that's right. It was a police helicopter. It's like, what?
That's wild, man. So this was an aside from you're starting to go down the rabbit hole of these alleged experiences at Skinwalker. And you're reading about these bipedal direwolf-like things. You're reading about all of these crazy, kinds of high weirdness. Is this striking you as like, there's no way this is true? Or like, what are you thinking at this point before you go down there?
Well, during that period, I'm reading Jacques' books now, the ones I didn't know about.
Okay.
Revelations, Dimensions, and Confrontations. Then I read The Passport to Magonia. I read the first, he only had the first volume of Forbidden Science out. And there's one other one.
Invisible College, maybe?
College.
Yeah.
So I read that. Now I'm seeing there's a lot more to this than I thought. I read Harley Rutledge's book. I've read James McDonald's papers from the University of Arizona. I think that was him. Yeah. But anyway, there was James McCampbell and a James McDonald. I think I might have this backwards. I think McCampbell was at the University of Arizona and McDonald was somewhere else, but it could be backwards.
So you're reading enough stuff now that you're like, okay, there's precedent for this kind of, it's weird, but there's precedent for
and
this.
These are and remember, Jacques Vallée went to the University of Texas, Austin, to get his master's degree in astronomy. And he had his first, I think his bachelor's degree at the Sorbonne when he was still in France. And then he went to Northwestern University to get his PhD in artificial intelligence and computer science. And that's where he ran into Alan Hynek.
Okay.
That's how he met Alan Hynek. And he talked about that at Contact in the Desert when he had a discussion panel with the Hynek kids.
Yeah.
All elderly, you know.
I missed it, unfortunately. But
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
So he went through the whole history of Hynek's life. Then he got to where he entered Hynek's life and how they got together and worked on the Project Blue Book stuff during the 60s. And he saw Hynek evolve away from the swamp gas Venus debunking explanation of UFO reports towards this is something more sophisticated. It is not explainable in terms of, oh, that's the planet Venus, or, oh, that was swamp gas, or a plasma, you know. So they were both realizing that this is a far more complicated phenomenon. And they were both realizing that this is a high technology phenomenon. And this high technology also has a psychic component.
Yeah.
It has an anti-physical and a psychic components. Those are two of the 6 characteristics that Jacques and I wrote about in our Portal paper of 2003. It got published as a proceedings in 2005. I don't know why. It's the Fernando Pessoa University. They held, I don't know if they still do, but they were holding the International Forum on Science, Religion, and Consciousness. And Jacques and I were invited to submit a paper, and we did on UFOs. So that's when we categorized the 6 characteristics of UAP, as we now call it. And 2 of those are anti-physical and psychic. Third one is physical. There's a psychological one. I think there's a social one. And so I know I'm missing one, probably cultural. So
back
to it involves, it's something that the UFO investigation research organizations were really guilty of during the 70s and 80s and 90s, and probably even up to today. They completely ignored the anti-physical and psychic component of the phenomenon at their peril.
Yeah.
Because you don't experience the phenomenon without all 6 components or features or characteristics, I should say. When you have an experience, all of them are present. And to ignore the psychic and anti-physical is throwing away scientific data. And that's what we concluded. And so when you excise data from the experience that's being reported to you by eyewitnesses, you're basically harming the analysis and and you're going to distort the conclusion that you reach.
Right.
And it's bad science, and the study of the phenomenon requires the holistic investigation, a holistic research study. And that means you've got to consider all 6 of those characteristics. And you've got to, and nowadays we say, you want to bring in philosophers. You want to bring in religious studies people, social studies people. You've got to bring those in because this phenomena impacts those areas very heavily and historically. And so this was exhibited at the NIDS UFO Ranch. It didn't become Skinwalker Ranch until Bass took over after NIDS shut down and Bigelow started rotating a security team from Bigelow Aerospace to work out there. So,
well, what ends up happening when you eventually go to the ranch? Because you end up spending a lot of time at the ranch on and off, right?
Of the 6 years I worked at NIDS, I spent 5 years there. Bob cut us off in August of 2001. Literally 5 years from the date we first went out. Well, I said September 96, so 4 years and 11 months on the ranch.
But what did you experience and find over your time
more than
there?
we have time to talk about. But
the
Hunt for the Skinwalker by Kelleher Knapp, that details it. I think they missed or skipped a couple of incidents. I just didn't see them. I read that book when it came out in 2004. And I knew in the back of my mind that there were a couple of events that got overlooked. And maybe it's because Colin forgot about them or what. But I had a telepathic contact with the black shadow that unfolded in a grove of trees at the old Pioneer homestead. Before that happened, just minutes before that happened, Colin and I witnessed a white orb hovering a foot, a yard above the ground, right in front of the big tree trunk of a
Wow.
Russian olive tree. And so we were probably, from where we were standing, it was more than 10 yards, but I think it was between 10 and 20 yards away from us, not that far from where
What
we were
was this
standing.
psychic connection to this black shadow like?
That was it coming into my mind, and I'm not hearing it come into my hearing aids or my ears.
Yeah.
I'm still listening. I still have a hearing aid in the right ear and no hearing aid in my left ear. This is the better ear, the left ear. And I just lost control of my body, no senses and stuff like that. The only senses that were working was just my eyes. I was using the night vision binoculars to kind of search around. I'm looking for another orb. I'm thinking, well, that orb was there. We both saw it with our eyes. The two ranch cattle, shepherd dogs, hunting dogs, those two dogs saw it because they were looking at it and were frozen in place next to each of us. He and I were a few yards apart, standing in an open pasture. The old dilapidated pioneer homes were over here. The ranch road, the dirt road, was over on the other side of them. And there's a grove of trees in front with barbed wire and an outhouse. And then we have the rest of the pasture that way. And then we have an open pasture gate. The fence was open right here to let the cattle through to the far west pasture. And there's no cattle present, by the way. They're all penned up about a half a mile away. So, and so we see the orb. There's still daylight. No, it was past twilight. So we had a little bit of sunlight left and it was darkening, but we saw that bright orb and it was clear as day. And I thought, oh, that could be a ranch home's porch light. And I then looking at it thinking, wait a minute, the ranch porch light I know of is not that color and it's the other direction. It's more of the, let's see, that's west, east. So that would have had to been south. So it's more of the southwest direction from where I was standing. And it's not white. It's an amber color and it's up high. This thing was just 3 feet above the ground and it's right in front of a tree trunk. So it's not shining from a porch. and these ranches are quite a distance apart. They're acres and acres apart, right? They're not next door. So the porch light explanation got eliminated right away. So we saw it without the night vision. And so my reaction now is, well, it winked out. It's gone. So I take the IT&T third generation night vision. These are military class night vision binoculars that we got a license to be able to buy because they're military technology. And I'm looking all around for another orb. I'm trying to see if that orb reappears somewhere else in the vicinity. Can't see it. I look up at the grove of trees. It's early spring, so the leaves haven't grown back on the trees. We have bare branches, and I can hear the crickets in the creek, or crickets everywhere else, but I hear frogs croaking and crickets in the creek. And all of a sudden, I'm looking up through the branches, and I can see the night sky through the bare branches with stars. I can see the range of mountains in the far west below them, below the branches and below the stars. That's the west horizon. Then all of a sudden, from on the far right of the grove of trees closest to the road, this dark spot appears and it starts growing in size, but it grows in size to envelope the canopy of this grove of trees. And It goes from right to left. And it ends to my left because that's where the barbed wire fence ends, where there's a post where you would have a gate that you would close, like it's a very long gate. And so I want to move the binoculars away from my face, turn and tell Colin what I'm seeing. Can't, I'm frozen. I can't move a muscle.
Wow.
So I no longer hear the crickets, no longer hear the frogs. The wind is we have a breeze and it's not, and usually any breezes, and it was in the right direction. It was in the right direction to hit the microphones in my hearing aids, and I'm always hearing that noise that it creates. So I'm not hearing the breeze saturate the microphones. So that's gone. I can't move my body. I can't do anything. I want to move my head. I can't move my head. I can't open my mouth. I want to talk, and I can't. and I want to take the binoculars off my eyes, and I can't. All I see is this black shadow, and the next thing I know, this incredibly loud, multiple metallic-like voices are in my head.
Wow.
And I'm not hearing it come through my ear or my hearing aid, which would be my ear, of course. Instead, it's inside my head, and it's pretty loud, and it says, "We are here, we are watching you," in a very terse, slow pace of a tone. So it's a terse tone, slow pace speech. "We are here, we are watching you." And not long after that, I think probably a second after that, all of a sudden, both ends of this dark shadow started coming together toward the middle. And they started folding in on themselves like some geometrical turbulence. And it was folding in on itself until it folded into a point and vanished.
Wow.
Then I'm hearing noise. I can hear the wind blowing into my hearing aid microphones. I'm starting to hear the crickets. That's another thing. I couldn't even feel the wind on my body. I couldn't feel the air temperature.
Like you're in like a parallel dimension or something almost.
No, it's just my senses got cut off. It was probably because it got into my mind and probably disconnected my sensory system, except for my eyes. Okay, so I'm now feeling the air, the temperature in the air. I can hear. Now I notice I can move. I pulled the binoculars off and I said, "Colin, did you see that?" And he said, "No, I saw you looking at the trees with the binoculars." And he said, the dog next to me pressed up against my left leg and was staring right at the trees. At the same time you were, and you had the other dog pressed up against your right leg, and it was doing the same thing as the first dog was doing. They both were pressed up against our legs, looking up at the trees while you were. And by the way, your mouth was moving, and you were saying some weird shit in a voice I've never heard you speak before. He heard me say, "We are here, we are watching you," come out of my mouth, but he said it was not in my normal voice. He said it was a very odd, he couldn't describe it. He couldn't describe it. I described to him how the voice sounded in my head, but he said he just couldn't characterize it. He just said it was not my voice. He said it was absolutely not my voice that was speaking. And I said, "But I couldn't move my mouth. I tried to move my mouth to talk to you, and I couldn't move my body. I couldn't move any muscle in my body. And I wanted to talk and take the binoculars off my eyes so I could turn to you and give you the binoculars. I wanted to give him the binoculars so he could see it with its own eyes through the binoculars." And I said I couldn't. I was frozen. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't feel anything. The only thing I could do was see this whole thing unfold. And then that message came into my head. And he said, "Well, you were staring at the trees and you said that, but that wasn't your voice. And it's not anything I've ever heard come out of your mouth before."
That's wild. Was this the only time you encountered this phenomenon?
Yeah, this is the only time. Now, he had a camera, which he always carries, and the camera is loaded with chilled IR film. It has to be chilled because when IR film gets to ambient temperature, it's overexposed because that's what it is. It's going to be exposed to the ambient infrared radiation in the environment. So it can't be out there for much more than some period of time. I don't remember. We were well inside that window because we took it out of the freezer, loaded in the camera. He affixed the IR filter to the lens, and we went out there. And it doesn't take us that long to go that distance out there on foot. So he basically was photographing everything. He photographed everything. He did not photograph that damned orb, but he photographed the event as I was seeing it, as he was hearing it coming out of my mouth, apparently. Just to fast forward through that story, we got the film in. I don't remember if we have to put it back in the fridge, but you can take it out. You have to take it out of the camera, and it's all wound up inside the film canister. And I think we have to put it in the fridge. And so we took it to Vernal and had it developed, and it came back overexposed.
Oh man. Yeah, this is an interesting conversation, like side conversation in and of itself, using IR and other kinds of film to maybe catch traces of weird things.
Yeah.
You know Adam Curry, right?
Who?
Adam Curry. He's about my age. He's spoken at Contact in the Desert a bunch of times. Psi researcher. He knows you, but
Oh, I didn't get to see him. I was so busy going to my
oh,
my
gotcha,
events.
gotcha. Anyway, he turned me on to a book a while ago by Trevor James Constable. And Trevor James Constable was this guy. It was called Cosmic Pulse of Life. Talks about a few different things in this book, but one of the things he's known for is trying to use infrared film and other kinds of film to photograph what he believed were various different kinds of organisms like living in the atmosphere. And they almost look like amoeba-like blob things and sometimes geometric things. And it's one of those things where you look at it and it's very intriguing, but you don't know like what you're looking at exactly. Like if this really is a life form of some kind, or if it's just a weird trick of the film. How deep down the rabbit hole of, infrared, night vision, these other kind of spectrums that are not visible. Do you think that that's a real way to capture phenomena?
I have no idea because we've never been successful on the ranch
Oh,
capturing
okay.
on film. And we had 4 surveillance cameras out there that had night vision capability built into them. They operated in the near IR. That's what it was. And they operated on 72-hour VHS time lapse. So we would record all that. And unfortunately, we have to when we make a trip out there, we got to bring back all the VHS tapes with us. Terry Sherman's job was to replace the VHS tapes, monitor the counters on each of the recorders to make sure that the recording doesn't end before he takes it out and puts a fresh tape in it to keep the recording going constantly. We wanted 24-hour surveillance every day of the week. And so then when we're out there for our week-long trip, we collect the tapes, take them back to Vegas, and we got to sit and watch them on a TV monitor all day long. And we have to, fast forward through some parts of it and so forth. Well, one fine day, I don't remember if it was me, who it was, whether it was me or George or Colin, but one of us discovered that one of the cameras died during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So he wound it back up. He rewound it back to where you could see an image. So what it is one of the surveillance cameras was actually pointed toward the other surveillance cameras on the other telephone poles along the ranch road. And so this camera went dead. And so he rewound it back to the point at which the image just dies and then you get static. So we note the date and time. And so we called up, I think Colin called up Terry, told him what happened. And Terry said the cameras are running at his end after he put new tapes in, especially in that particular camera's monitor, because not only do you have the VHS players, but you've got them on top of their own monitors. So Terry can go in there, we tell him camera 2 or whatever it was, and he'll look at that monitor, and he said, no, the monitor is running, the camera's operating, and it's recording, and so forth. So he then, I take it back, that's wrong. He said the monitor was dead. That's right, it was dead. Okay. So I lapse of memory because of the years. So yes, he did say the camera was dead because it's recording static. That's what the VHS monitor was showing, was static. That's right. So he went out there to take a look at the telephone pole it was on because it's got the cabling that runs from the house to go up the pole. It's tacked onto the pole to go up to the camera. And he discovered that the cable had been cut.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't torn away. It was cut perfectly as if somebody took like a pair of large wire cutters and just cut right through it, because he said the cut was pretty perpendicular to the length of the cable, to the direction of the cable, and it was clean. It wasn't chewed on or wrestled with or anything like that. The camera the camera that was watching that telephone pole, we rewound that. This is what I was garbling up earlier.
Okay.
So we rewound that VHS tape to the day and time that the other one went dead, and there was nothing going on. We could see that telephone pole that has that camera mounted on it at that time and day, and nothing's happening. There's no cattle there. There isn't a person wandering around out there cutting. You don't see anybody cutting the cable.
So it just...
Yeah, you don't even see the cable cut either. You're looking at it really hard, and it's like, this is not blurry or fuzzy. This is sharp. sharply focused, and you can't even tell that the cable has been cut. And the cable is not cut at height level, person's height level, cut a little bit further up. So the other camera that's looking at the telephone poles so the one camera looking at the other telephone poles with the other cameras mounted on it does not see anything or anybody cutting that cable. So that's what the other VHS tape showed us at that time and date. And so this was really weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
So one camera dies, Terry sees it, but we got the tapes and we rewound it back to look at that date and time when that camera died, and the other camera that's looking at it sees absolutely nothing happening.
Wild.
So that was broad daylight.
Yeah.
Then there's another time, this one's me because this is the one I remember discovering. So I'm doing my usual afternoon, going through the tapes. I got one tape in this camera. We've got two cameras that are looking at the near pasture close to the house. So one camera's looking one way and the other kind of camera's actually looking at a slightly different angle, but you can still see parts of the same pasture. So this is deep in the night. I know it's well past midnight. So it's well past midnight. I don't remember the exact time. All of a sudden, this big, bright, light saturating orb appears from out of the cameras, comes into the camera's field of view, and it's hovering low above the ground because it is so bright that the light emanating from its bottom hits the blades of grass on the pasture below it. You could see all the individual blades of grass on the ground. You're not seeing darkness. You're not seeing maybe some facsimile of what could you think is grass. You're actually seeing the blades of grass well lit up by the light coming from the bottom of this orb. This orb is so damn bright that it's oversaturating the solid state detector on the camera, the CCD camera. And so you're getting like a star pattern. So you see the round orb and you'll see saturation in the horizontal and vertical direction.
Is there footage of this that people see this footage anywhere?
No, Bigelow's got all that locked up in his storage warehouse.
Why?
Yeah. So we're seeing this from the first camera that I saw it. It's coming toward the camera. So this thing is coming toward the camera, steady, even pace. It's not changing altitude. It's maintaining an approximately constant altitude because I'm always seeing the blades of grass being lit up under its track of motion. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So whichever parts of the grass it's shining on is the grass that's lit up, but the grass behind it or in front of it's not lit up. It's just whatever is beneath that orb is being lit up, and you could see the blades of grass. So it's coming at you. Then it makes a perfect 90-degree turn to the right from my vantage point, watching it on the monitor. So it's coming straight toward the camera, makes a smooth, flawless 90-degree turn without slowing down, stopping, and speeding up again. It's just a flawless, constant speed where it changes direction by 90 degrees, and it goes off the monitor to the right. The other camera that saw it come across a part of its view, and the same thing. We see this big ball of light. It's super bright, and you could see all the blades of grass beneath it. But it's coming from that camera's vantage point, from its angle of view with respect to the first one. It's coming across a different field of view. And I don't remember which way it was pointing, but it was pointing at a different angle. So it did catch that orb, but the orb was just moving across the monitor's field of view, or the monitor as you would see it across the camera's field of view. And it was gone.
Wow.
That was spectacular. It's the first time NIDS caught anything like that on tape.
Yeah.
And recorded it. And so we've had episodes like where we've seen large amber-colored, well, it looked like an orb, but I could see there was structure in it, fly over the mesa, come out over the ranch. Colm and I are out there like at 3 o'clock in the morning on a cold, late November night. And it's like, wow, we're really cold out here. And we just can't get to bed. So we just got in like maybe an hour or so before that from the night watch. And so we go back out, take another look, and here comes this big ass thing flying steadily at low altitude. Now the The mesa is 100 feet tall. I ascertained that this thing would have been no more than 500 feet up above this ground level. So about 5 times the height of the mesa. So it comes straight out, and it's coming from the north. Let's see. Yes, it's coming from the north, and it's heading south, and then it gets over the pasture, and it's not quite above us, but it's close, and it makes a perfect, just like that orb on camera. This was actually November of '96, so this is long before we put the surveillance cameras in. So nobody got this on film, video, photograph, or anything. And to tell you the truth, I don't think we had our cameras then. Okay. So anyway, it comes out, and instead of slowing down to make a perfect 90-degree turn, it makes a perfect 90-degree turn without slowing down, flawless.
Wow.
And now it's heading east, and it goes over the house, and we lose sight of it. And neither of us had the presence of mind to run around the house to follow where it's going. Two stupid PhDs who didn't get off that porch and go around the front and go look for it and see where it goes to. And I don't know why we didn't do it. I think maybe we were just so stunned looking at it, but I could see a structure inside of it. So I don't categorize that one as an orb. Now our first day on the ranch, we stayed overnight with Bob, and that evening we're all there, including Terry Sherman. And that's when we're all kind of looking out the windows, and they're bullshitting and whatever. I finally see through the kitchen window that another one of those, this is the first time I saw the first amber orb-like object come down, descend perfectly vertically down from the west, up high on the west sky, because I'm looking west. And it goes vertically down, and it goes behind a grove of trees. And so that was my first clue. It was not a star or planet setting.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's not even on the ecliptic anyway. But it's not setting because there is a mountain range behind it, as I already knew. And it landed, and I could see the grove of trees and their branches blocking the light as it finally came down. And it stayed on when I think it hit the ground, and it went out. The light just went out. And I told everybody, and they went out looking for it, and they said, well, where did it go? And I pointed to which direction I saw the light go out. And I said, that's where it landed. And they said, oh, wow. So they're talking about it. Nobody had the presence of mind to get in a truck or the vehicles and drive out there and look for it. So we didn't, and that was our first trip out there in early September. So we did not have our instrumentation then at that time. Okay, so I'm not going to take my eyes off of that. I want to see if something else happens. Sure enough, I'm watching my watch, and exactly 30 minutes later, that light came back on. Only it had displaced itself by what might have been a good chunk of, probably a fraction of a football field to the left of the position where I saw it land and wink out. Well, that's where I saw it wink on. It came on. I could see the foliage in front of it, but it's bright enough that the light gets through it. And then it stayed there, and I watched the watch. I told everybody about it. They saw it, and then it went out like 5 minutes later, and it just vanished.
Wow.
So the next day we go out there, and we're looking around at, after we wake up in the morning and have breakfast and all that stuff, and we don't find a sign of anything out there. We're way out there. There's a million of these flying bugs. They are not mosquitoes. A million, they want to get in your eyes. They want to go up in your nose. And if you open your mouth, bad news. They get in your, so we put these pith helmet nets over our faces, because Bob Bigelow bought those at Terry Sherman's recommendation, so we could cover our heads and not be bothered by those damn bugs. And I don't know what kind of insects those were, but they were pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
They didn't sting or bite. They just wanted to get up into every orifice they can find their way into.
Man.
That was life on that ranch, by the way.
Yeah, it sounds
I was
like
only on that part of the ranch, too, near that crevice where the creek ran through.
I imagine it's probably one of those things where it's just, rural, mundane, and then every now and then something super insane happens that like wakes you back up. And so you spent so much time out there. You had all these experiences of orbs, of lights. You had this weird psychical experience. Any weird cryptid experiences? Because that's
no, actually not. Well, maybe sort of.
Okay.
So I had the corner room, and if today, a lot of that pasture's been modified. Brandon Fugel got rid of the barbed wire fence that kept the cattle penned in that pasture away from the back porch of that house. That's the house that Bigelow installed. It's a manufactured double wide. And he had that giant observation deck put on the back. So you go out through the mudroom where the laundry room is, and the back door takes you onto that deck, that porch. And then there'd be the barbed wire fence on the other side of it. So Brandon removed all that, put in a helipad, and cleared out all the grass. So it's all mostly dirt, concrete, and a sidewalk. And okay, so when you're looking at it from the vantage point of the helipad, and somebody has a video of it from the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch show or photograph, you'll see a window on the far right side of the house, just to the right of the end of the deck. That's my old bedroom.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sleeping in that corner bedroom for, I think it was a number of nights. Might have been a number of nights 1 week I was there, and a number of nights another week I was there. We'd be there between 1 and 2 weeks every month. So it'd be another month I'd be there, and the same damn thing happened roughly 2 hours before dawn. I'm smelling this horrifically strong odor, and it's waking me up, and it brings back recall of my childhood at my grandparents' house, my paternal grandparents' house in Prescott, Arizona, in the mountain club off of Copper Basin Road in Prescott. And they're up amongst the boulders and the granite boulders and dirt roads and hills, and they're in a 19...
What kind of odor is this?
Well, this is what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So I've got the bedroom upstairs. They've got the master suite. And then all of this is above the boulders, that part of the house. And there's and so I'm in that corner room, and that bottom part of the house over the boulders is all curtained off. And that's where the previous owners and my grandparents were storing stuff in. So it became a storage facility. The swamp cooler and gas heater are in there. And apparently the female skunks like to go back into the corner where the heater is, and the AC is, or the swamp cooler is, and that's where they would hide to give birth to their babies. Okay, so we got dogs running loose in the neighborhood, and the dogs would scare the skunks, so they would spray. And so just before sunrise, I'm inundated with this headache-inducing odor of skunk spray. And it comes up from underneath the house into my room, and it's like, oh, God, it's terrible. Well, that's the same effect is at the ranch, only it was not skunk. I've smelled skunk so many times. I lived in Arizona for the first 38 years of my life. So, and I was really in Las Vegas before at age 35, but just before my 36th birthday. So I was living in Las Vegas then, but I was still a citizen with the driver's license of Tucson until my family relocated, and we bought a home in Vegas in very early 98.
Yeah.
Okay. So roughly 37 years in Arizona. I've been everywhere. I know I've driven over dead skunks, and I know what the damn things smell like, including when they're alive and on the side of the road and they're scared, and they'll spray and you'll smell it. Okay. This odor at the ranch was not skunk. It was something completely different. I would describe it as a strong musky odor. I told that to Colin, and Colin has been reading up all the literature on this, on cryptids and things like that, and Bigfoot. And he suggested that that could have been a possible cryptid or Bigfoot that was out there. So when daylight came, I was up ready to get out of that house and go around to the outside of my bedroom from the back porch. And I was looking for footprints. I was looking for anything. That odor was not there. When you have a skunk spray, that odor will be there.
Yeah, it lingers.
Hours, even a day later.
Yeah.
No odor. So I'm out there just probably, I go back to bed. I'm now waking up. I'm awake, and it's like it takes time for me to go back to sleep, and I just don't want to get up. So I stay in bed, and then sunlight is out, and it's past sunrise, and I get dressed and go out there and look. No footprints. I just see the cat's paw prints, the dog's paw prints, and no odor. No odors emanating from anything.
Weird.
Yeah, very weird. So Colin thinks we got visited, and he was there at the time. And so was George Annette. So he thinks we got visited. And whatever it was came around my room, and I didn't have any interactions. I was sound asleep. But like I said, this is probably an hour or two before sunrise, and boom.
Yeah. I bet you never thought of among the strange encounters you'd have one with a phantom, disgusting ghost smell. Like,
no,
I never would have thought that.
Yeah.
So we
Colin had the room next to me, and he didn't smell it.
Yeah.
Every time I reported it that in the morning after when it happened, he said, "God, I didn't smell a thing. I slept perfectly through the night. Nothing woke me up."
Of course.
That's what he said. George was on the far room, and he also reported not smelling anything either.
Very strange. So we have an hour tops left, and we haven't gotten into any legacy program, any crash retrieval type stuff.
Okay.
But closing the chapter on Skinwalker, having spent so much time there, having talked to everybody who also spent so much time there, and hearing about all these stories and compiling all this data, what is your best guess at what's going on there?
Well, it's a precognitive sentient phenomenon. And we say it's precognitive because it knows what we're going to do before we do it. Because it always, with the exception of the orb that I caught on 2 separate surveillance cameras in the dead of the night, and except for our eyes that saw phenomena, there was another one that happened with Colin, Terry, Sherman, and I that I hadn't described yet. So that it's a variety. It's not consistent. It's not always a UFO craft. Yeah. We don't see grays. We don't see Nordics. We don't see NHIs that resemble insects or resemble lizard reptiles or whatever. We don't see any of that. We're seeing orbs. We're seeing a giant orb up in the sky at high altitude with, well, like I said, it was probably 500 feet is what I should say. And I could see a structure inside, but I couldn't make out a shape of it. There was a structure, and that could be what's emitting that light. But at the on the first night of the ranch, what the orb I saw come down, you can't tell from our distance that there was any structure in it. And it was hard to make out a size. Given that distance, given the distance I knew we were from that, where it was, I was having to guess where it landed because it had like a half a football field of distance, maybe less, where it could have landed in the west direction. So it could have landed right behind a grove of trees, or it could have landed out in the middle of an empty pasture between the trees and the next door neighbor's ranch, or it could have happened all the way at the barbed wire at the next door neighbor's ranch. So I don't know. I'm guessing that, or probably was close to the size of the orb I saw. Wow. In order for it to be big enough for me to see it at a half a mile. Yeah. And for it to be bright enough and large enough for me to see it at a half a mile. It's not a pinprick light, not a pinpoint light. It's an extended light, and it's spherical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had all these experiences, and they're different. The phenomenon, I think, was exhibiting different sides of itself based on whatever agenda it had. Yeah. And we never could figure it out.
I mean, it's hard not to use words like haunting or words like, I don't even know what terminology, but some kind of, like you said, sentient intelligence that is definitely not fully physical, that's residing on that land and is manifesting in all different kinds of ways on that land. I mean, it makes you think of, Keel's sort of like notion of there being these window areas or areas where the veil is thinner between whatever realm we're in and whatever the realm that thing inhabits, or I mean, who knows? But it's definitely, I mean, the amount of compelling stories and the amount of people who corroborate those stories that come out of that place are certainly compelling. So
well, let me tell you, in the modern ranch, that Brandon Fugel owns it, and he's spending the kind of money Bob Bigelow did not want to spend on scientific instrumentation and doing pretty daring experimentation, like shooting rockets up in the air.
Yeah.
Launching balloons up in the air with cameras and sensor systems and tracking systems, drilling in the mesa, drilling in the ground. I mean, Bigelow had Terry rent a giant bulldozer so we could carve giant chunks of ground out of the far pasture. Terry dug trenches, actually. These are deep trenches, and because the tractor's going to, this is the bulldozers on tracks, it's going to go down a slope. and it's going to go very deep. So it's going when you get to the bottom of it, it's going to have very high walls. You're down there, and it's also wide because it's going to be as wide as the shovel. But I understood that Terry didn't go with the width of the shovel. He went in and made 2 or 3 shovels with cuts into it.
Yeah.
So he made, I don't remember how many he made. He made several of these in that far pasture. You could walk down in it. When we walked down into it, nothing happened. Nothing happened to us, either consciously or psychically. Nothing happened with the instrumentation. No unusual readings. No phenomenon occurred as a result of that. That's what Bob was attempting to do by digging those trenches out, was to poke the phenomenon, to get it to come out
right.
and act up and show itself.
Yeah.
Didn't work.
Huh.
So now we have Brandon Fugel spending millions on these very expensive outside experts and consultants. These are businesses that work in the petroleum industry in Nevada, in Utah, sorry. So they're up there drilling and pumping and all that, and they have all this really, if you're going to rent that type of equipment that drills into the mesa or drills down, they have augers and things like that, water pumps, water systems, everything that he's taken out there. He's paying these guys probably a couple $1,000s an hour to be there for the labor and equipment, maybe more.
Yeah.
So this is stuff Bob wouldn't do.
Sure.
So he's done that, and guess what we find out? We've got the what was that? The triangle? Is that what they call it?
I don't know.
Okay, well, it's the place where there are 3 directions of road that come together there over by the mesa.
Yeah.
So there's the triangle. Then they find that there seems to be some sort of an energy bubble going up to roughly a mile above the ground level, and things go haywire when you come into contact with that bubble with any experimental sensor system. So they have troubles out there. They have anomalies. They have unusual things that don't make sense, and they're trying to sort this out. But it's become clear that they've discovered some sort of a bubble over that particular spot on the ranch where there's energy being exhibited, and that energy seems to mess with the sensor systems on board balloons and rockets and whatnot.
So it has a domain of sorts.
Yeah. So you see, if I had the money that they've had, I would have discovered that too. And I had the Science Advisory Board to advise me. I had 2 fellows of Los Alamos National Lab, were both PhD physicists on the board. That was John Dale Solom and Marty Pilch. And they were on the board. They were my source of technological information for doing some advanced physics experiments out there. And Bob would say, well, go ahead. Can you pitch me a proposal? And I'll say, okay, let me work with Marty and design something. And I did. And I took it to Bob and I said, hey, it's going to cost $28,000. Shut it down.
Yeah. Bummer.
Hey, Bob, Colin and I got a free 30-day trial use of a infrared thermal imager. We'll take infrared off. It's a thermal imager. That doesn't mean infrared is not involved, but thermal imager is heat from the body, and heat is transported by infrared radiation anyway. So it's the type of thermal imager fire departments use. This was a new generation of them that were being advertised because they're handheld. They have either the various visual palettes you can choose from, full color, black and white, or black and red, that kind of thing, to see cool versus hot. And it records all the data on a flash drive. The first year that flash drives came out.
Yeah.
So I don't, you know what a flash drive is.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's lightweight, so it's not going to be weighty. And it was only $12,500. That was the smallest model. The bigger model was not, weighed a little bit more, wouldn't have been a burden to hold it. Now,
let's switch gears because we have limited time, and I do want to spend, because this is a big chapter of your story and a big chapter that obviously the audience is so interested in, which is, I mean, there's so many ways to go into this as well, but I think we could just start it out with returning to those yes/no questions that I asked you in the beginning. You know, I asked, was there a reverse engineering program? Was there a legacy program? Are we in contact with extraterrestrial non-human intelligence? And you said yes to all of those things. So maybe the real question of interest for everyone is, I do want to hear the background of how that all started for you and your experience. But Yeah, what convinced you to get you to a yes on those questions?
Oh, this is a long story, but I can shorten it. I interviewed a retired president. I interviewed a retired colonel in the Air Force who was a DIA chief of staff for a major human intelligence is human management office at the DIA. I interviewed a legacy aerospace corporation that no longer exists because it got absorbed by another one after the turn of the millennium. The executive administrative assistant of the crash retrieval program that this company was contracted to run at an Air Force facility.
Mm-hmm.
And this individual was in charge of the security and the skip. In other words, her boss hires the field security officers and she manages them. She oversees them on his behalf, her boss's behalf, a man. And so she's in charge of security, in charge of the skiff. She oversees those guys. She has access to the skiff, and she has access to the 6 or so intact UFO craft that her program received from the recovery team.
Wow.
The recoveries were not CONUS, they were foreign recoveries. So these were craft that were recovered overseas. They had intact craft. They actually, the engineers and scientists working on that program at this company were frustrated as hell because they couldn't figure out how the control systems work. They couldn't get anything to activate until one scientist did some combination of things in outright frustration, and a craft turned on and it levitated and it emitted a ear-piercing whining noise. And they couldn't turn it off. This individual never did explain whether they did or were, whether they were able to or not able to ever turn that thing off and get it to settle back on the ground or on the floor of the warehouse that it was secured in, and whether that noise was shut off. Never got that story. But so that was one.
So is this all going on during the AAWSAP years?
No, this is all during the Cold War.
Okay.
So this gal, I blew it. So anyway,
well, you said this other places.
This individual says,
yeah.
Was working for that company from 19. Actually, this individual was working for that company from 1969 until they quit in 1984. But they had started in California at the company's location there, went to felt Belvoir on a change in position that required that they move to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And then the last move that individual made was to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. And so that individual was there from roughly 74 to 84, 77 to 84, something in that ballpark. I think it was 77 to 84. For 7 years, that individual worked on the crash retrieval program. Then during the AAWSAP, before AAWSAP got started, Hal Puthoff and I are already working on a collaborative experimental proposal study, a study to propose a series of experiments to explore the nature and characteristics of the quantum vacuum structure, which includes an experiment to determine the property of inertia by way of whether inertia is explained by quantum vacuum fluctuation. In other words, inertia being mass. And then the rest of it was, can we extract energy from the quantum vacuum without violating energy conservation? And so we had a series of experiments. The guy who was supporting that or sponsoring it was the senior VP and director. Now, he's the senior VP of this company's it's
pre-merger or post-merger.
Hang on, it's complicated. I have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so this company is a conglomerate, but it's got individual companies.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say the name of it. Everybody already knows what it is, but I don't want to get into trouble by naming it anyway. So they've got this company there, but they all begin with the same two names, first names of that company.
Yeah.
Such and such space and missile systems, such and such helicopters or whatever. Okay. So he's the senior VP of the company in California, but his dual hat job is he's the director of their Advanced Technology Center. So he's sponsoring this collaboration that involved Hal Puthoff and later Hal Hi. Now, this started in 2004 before I got hired in November of 2004. So then as soon as I stepped foot in Austin and started working for Hal at EarthTech, Hal brought me into it because this is one of my areas of interest that I've had since graduate school, which he already knew when I submitted my CV for that job ad by NIDS.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah. Okay, so, and then I have to do a lot of work with quantum vacuum, 0-point energy, quantum vacuum fluctuations energy, whichever word you would like to use to describe it, because you can engineer that in the lab to a certain degree, and that type of energy can be manipulated to produce the type of vacuum energy that you need to create wormholes and warp drives to go faster than light without violating Einstein's special theory of relativity. And this is from within Einstein's general theory of relativity. And this particular type of quantum vacuum energy comes out of quantum field theory. It's all predicted out of quantum field theory to begin with. So anyway, so the senior VP and director of who's the director of the Advanced Technology Center at this company, was overseeing our project. And his goal is for us to undergo, so we've already written our proposed experiments up in great detail. And he wants an internal independent review panel within the company to evaluate our proposals. And this isn't one proposal. It's a proposal of consisting of a list of separate proposals to do separate experiments, to explore separate parts, or take different approaches to explore the quantum vacuum as far as extracting energy, net over unity energy, or we don't want to say over unity because we don't know that that's the case, but we'll say net useful energy that can be converted, accounting for losses, systematic losses and things like that. Okay, as well as exploring the foundation of inertia, or the origin of inertia, I should say, at the quantum physics level. So he's doing that, and we evolve over the next few years, and it came to a close because the game plan was to get DARPA. There's a DARPA program manager who was overseeing a portfolio of research that we fell into. So he became our portfolio manager. And the idea was then, once the company's independent review board cleared our proposals, which they did, then the senior VP wanted to send it out to independent peer reviewers outside of the company who are well known in the United States for their theoretical and experimental research on quantum vacuum fluctuations and 0-point energy. And so they published peer-reviewed papers in the elite journals. So that happened. So these were 3 individuals who published books and technical papers. They reviewed our proposals and they gave it the green light. They said, great. So now that we got the green light from internal company review panel and external independent reviewers who are experts in the field, we take it to the DARPA program manager, and he's out. He's out because he was involved in some shenanigans involving a professor at Texas A&M University who thought that the hafnium isotope could explode and produce nuclear energy in ways that were beyond uranium and plutonium. And he thought it would superior to uranium and plutonium bombs and power generating sources. And it turned out his physics was really off.
Okay, so he just went the wrong direction.
Yeah, he went in the wrong direction. So the DARPA program manager was sinking funds into that. There was experimentation going on, and the experiments did not realize the professor's claims at all.
So let me just step back, summarize
this.
So
that politically killed our project. Because with the DARPA program manager gone, nobody else stepped into his role to fill his role in when he left and take up our project. They just walked away from all of it.
Okay.
So we couldn't pursue it. Well, from that connection with that senior VP, a couple more years go by. Well, let's see, a lot more years go by. So a few more years go by, and then it's made known to us that by the senior VP's senior project engineer, who was our coordinator for our project, he revealed to Hal Puthoff that senior VP worked on the crash-retrieval program when he was a junior employee in the company right after he got hired.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So can I ask a hypothetical question about this hypothetical person? Are you aware of his like esoteric interests?
Yeah, he had esoteric interests. Yeah.
Do you think so? This is something I've wondered about him specifically because this person who shall not be named.
Well, this guy's got a PhD in materials engineering,
Right.
material science.
Yeah.
So he starts his career at a super secret division of the company that has to do with all of our spy planes. And so you have to have materials engineers because you're dealing with aircraft that are flying at ultra high altitudes. They may be flying at ultra high speeds with super high atmospheric friction on them, so they're going to heat up. So you got to have a metal or some sort of an alloy or whatnot that can hold that aircraft together in those conditions. And they're moving at high Mach speed too.
Right.
So there's all kinds of stress put on the airframe, and you need a materials guy who can come up with the type of materials and develop them, test them, and prove them, and then field it by building an aircraft using that material to make sure it can handle its mission.
So here's my question.
That's the thing. So this guy's
ask.
A material scientist. Yeah.
So how does a material scientist who's into very nuts and bolts, straightforward science get so into this esoteric stuff that because hypothetically this person has talks out there where he's talking about all kinds of, Western esoteric ideas, ideas of like there being like an etheric realm, etheric beings, there being higher intelligences that we're in contact with. And though he seems open-minded to those things being thought of as like alien, he's definitely talking about them in a more esoteric context.
Well, he used to read Madame Blavatsky's book for 1 hour every day in the morning before work started.
Wow.
He'd go to work an hour early. And so he'd get to work an hour early, shut his door, and read Madame Blavatsky's book for that hour, and then put it away when work started. 8 a.m. rolls along, and now he's going to work.
So do you think this interest had anything to do with what he encountered in these classified settings, or do you think he was interested in this stuff to begin with and it was just
No, he and I spent a great deal of time together. I'd been at his house 3 times. We had lunch together. We also had dinner together with one of his former crash retrieval coworkers.
Wow.
And so the gist of what he told me is that his exposure to this phenomenon, by the way, his wife, and his daughters are experiencers. So that's the other part of this. And not a lot of people are aware of it. They were in the LA area, and they're now on the coastal highway going back up to San Jose where they live. So it's middle of the night, dark, clear sky, beautiful stars in the sky. And all of a sudden he sees something big and black in the sky with an unusual light pattern on 2 sides of it, because it's moving in such a way that he could see both sides of it. One set of motions, he sees one side, and then it turns around, and then he could see the other side. What it was doing is it caught his eye. He asked his wife, she's in the front passenger seat, and the girls are in the back sleeping. And he asked his wife, "Do you see that?" She saw it right off the bat, because whatever this thing was, it was dark. It was blocking the stars wherever it was moving. The stars would disappear behind it. And they saw this unusual pattern of lights on the side of it that they saw. And then he pulls off the road. They pull off the highway, get someplace where they could park safely. He and his wife get out. The girls are awake because the car stops. They get out. They're all looking at it. And they saw it move in a figure 8 pattern, a giant figure 8 pattern, not a little one, not a tight little one. It's like doing a figure 8 pattern, almost not quite horizon to horizon, but close enough. And it's doing a wide figure 8. And when they see it on one side, they see a double cross. So in other words, like a little cross inside of an outer cross. And it's not a solid, it's dashed lines. And so the dashed lines in the vertical direction of the cross are moving inward. And then the dashed lines of light on the horizontal part of the cross are moving outward. Then it would reverse. So they would, on the horizontal part, they would go from the outward edges of the horizontal parts of the cross and move inward toward the center. And then the vertical ones would move inward toward the center vertically.
Okay.
And then when they saw it come around on the other part of the figure 8 where they see the other side of it, they saw the same pattern on that double cross arrangement. They were segmented double crosses, one inside the other. And this craft reminded him of the Navy's Tic Tac, but one side of it was more narrowed down than the other side was, but it did not come to a point. And he said it was not a smooth conical. It was like I don't know what the geometrical term would be, but it was more, it was like this. Well, it's like that.
Okay.
Curved. So the nose came down away from the main body in a curved fashion, not a straight slope.
Curved object, no wings.
No,
just...
it had, okay. First of all, they were able to make it out because it was close. He estimated probably not much higher than a couple thousand feet, or between 1,000 feet up. And it was rather large. So he's estimating good 50 to 100 feet in length. So the nose is curving inward from the top and bottom. He's only seeing it from the profile view, but he's assuming that it's a conical, but a curved conic. So it's curving away toward the point where it's not a point, but it kind of curves around at the tip. So it's curving toward a tip, and it's rounded at the tip. He could see that, and he could see the weird cross light patterns on each side. And it's moving at a pretty good clip in the figure 8, and it's staying at the same altitude. He doesn't even notice it ascending or descending or pitching or banking. It's just staying a perfect thing. No external control surfaces, no jet engines. He doesn't see anything that looks like an air intake or an exhaust, and definitely no rocket engines. It wasn't glowing anywhere in the body that would lead you to believe that those would be a propulsion exhaust. So that's what he saw. So that was what he declared to be a UFO craft. Wife saw it, the girls saw it, and amazingly, when one of the girls grew up and she went to college, she got her degrees in optical engineering, and she went to work for his company, for his employer.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other one is a artist working on her own little farm / I think it's a farm. And she sees orbs and photographs orbs a lot.
Wow. So he not only has these interests, but he's also an experiencer.
He's also, 4 of them are experiencers.
Yeah, right.
And he explained that what he learned from the phenomenon through the Wave-Denic Knowledge Special Access Program briefings that he was given access to, and what he read in the literature. He read Jacques Vallée's books, Alan Hynek's books. He read, I didn't mention earlier, Peter Sturrock's book back in Peter Sturrock published his book in the early 2000s, late 90s or something. Well, Peter Sturrock was an astrophysicist at Stanford University.
Okay.
And he knew Hal Puthoff very well. He knew Hal when Hal was running the remote viewing program. I think he even knew Hal when Hal was in the electrical engineering department working on his PhD in laser physics, in the laser, the electronics and quantum optics of lasers. And that's what he earned his doctorate in. And Hal and Sturrock knew each other. They're the ones that co-founded the Society for Scientific Exploration, which had its academic journal that was published by Stanford University Press, the Journal of Scientific Exploration. And that's moved on because he died. Then it went to Bernie Heisch, who was at Lockheed Martin. And Bernie, I don't remember where that was published when he took over as the editor. And then it's moved on. It's changed hands a couple of times since then. But anyway, Jim has read the Journal of Scientific Exploration articles. He's investigated the really good books. He read Matt Blavatsky. I know I talked to him a lot. He's very well aware of remote viewing, and he had a lot of exposure to Hal Puthoff during our official AAWSAP collaborations with him and on the crash retrieval topic. And so I think this only came about when he got more and more exposed to the crash retrieval program. So when he started, it was a matter of we were given pieces of recovered craft. And I said, why didn't you see a recovered craft, or maybe a whole wall, or if not a ship, a wall, or maybe a big control panel? He said, no, the 3-letter agency that parsed out this stuff to the companies to study and attempt to reverse engineer did, for the most part, would give them pieces of it. There would be some flat structures or some smaller structures, but they had pieces and structures. And I'm not talking pieces like broken shards. He didn't describe shards or chunks.
Yeah.
He just said pieces of equipment.
Okay.
That's what he's referring to.
Okay.
Pieces of equipment. And he said the reason why they did that is that the owner, did not want the contractor's personnel to be able to realize what this was they were studying and what its implications was. They didn't want the engineers to understand that this was a recovered UFO craft.
So
of
these
exotic origin.
So these just like high level.
So this was to develop plausible deniability of what the origin of this material is. But he was briefed on, he and his boss were briefed on actually there were two. So they were briefed on what the origin of the material was, but they were not to tell their engineers what that information was.
Right.
They were not cleared for that level of information.
So,
all they were told is, here's some really exotic stuff. It's unusual. We want you to study it and tell us what you can learn about it. Can we reproduce it? Can we understand it at a physics level? Can we duplicate the fabrication technology that can make it?
Right.
Okay. And does it have any properties we could exploit for commercial or military technology development? That was the whole mandate.
These companies have, you can find online, these big defense contractor companies have these like foreign material exploitation divisions, right? Yeah,
foreign material acquisition.
Yeah. So they would, give, hey, what do you think? This is something. What do you think of it? And they wouldn't get the explanation. They would just get chunks of weird things and be told, what can you do with this? What can you figure out?
Leadership would be told what it is because they've got to channel it through their waived unacknowledged special access program teams, or they have to stand up a team. And so when you stand up a team, that's highly stovepiped. So nobody else in the company knows about it. Certainly not any of the other SAP, SCI, or waived unacknowledged special access program guys. I'll call that WUSAP, WUSAP. None of those guys are going to know about it, just the one they stand up for this assignment. So the leadership knows what it is, where it's from, and why it's been given to them for under a contract. But the engineers that are given eligibility for access and need to know to work on it, they're not to know. They're not to have there's another reason. Sorry. It's to keep their minds from being front loaded in advance that this is exotic alien technology off world from some, maybe a planet or parallel dimension on another planet, whatever. They don't, the purpose is the leadership of the company doesn't want their engineers' minds wandering into,
non-technical territory.
Well, dead ends.
Okay.
Into alleys that lead to dead ends and nothing positive or beneficial or productive, I should say productive, comes out of it for the amount of money they're getting paid on the contract.
Yeah.
They got to do producibles, even if it's a negative result. At least they can say, the idea is not to front load their minds so that when they're looking at this stuff on their lab bench, they're not automatically leaping or making big leaps into logic of junk pseudoscience. They've got to avoid the pseudoscience. You've got to do this at the scientific level using the physics and the engineering and the science as a whole and manufacturing engineering that they are aware of now. And you don't want them to go on. Oh, here's a better word. They're not being front loaded by the leadership to keep them from going on wild goose chases, trying to figure out an explanation. That's not the right approach to go. They got to go to a methodical, scientific method approach that leads them to some conclusion, whether positive or negative, or a combination of both. But if you front load them with pseudoscience ideas, if you front load them with this, they'll be compelled or motivated to jump into those pseudoscience avenues. They're going to be looking at Paul Violet's BS, anti-gravity stuff, Rho Sigma. I know Rho Sigma's name. He's a German guy. He had a book on the ether and anti-gravity. Okay. And they don't want those guys going there. They want the guys to focus on the atoms, the molecules, the alloys, the composition, the fabrication, the materials, property characterization. What is this stuff and what does it do? Or what can we do with it?
Do you think, so you've publicly said before that it seems like the conclusion that was reached is that we have not made a lot of progress in reverse engineering this stuff and really figuring it out.
That's what the senior VP told me.
But
I saw
let me
him
ask a
before
side
he
question,
died
though.
in 2018,
Yeah.
and that was still the story because he had his replacement, and his replacement he kept in contact with, and so he would talk privately with his replacement about, well, how's the team doing on it, because they would shut this down for about 10-year increments because of
Yeah.
no progress, and the government customer, didn't want to keep it funded in perpetuity.
Mhm.
So they said, just bring it out of, cold storage every 10 years and start a new fresh team of people, or you already have a new fresh team of people already hired and the other guys have cycled out and moved on by that time. So put them on. Oh, and the physics and the engineering might have advanced quite a long ways in
Right.
over 10 years. So start fresh with new people and new physics and new engineering that has come along after the 10 years of
Yeah.
hibernation. Okay, so
So
he
there's
checked
rumors,
in.
though, about, like, it's one thing to be like, yes, we've reverse engineered an entire UFO and we know how to make an ARV now. But there's also, like, have we made other ancillary technological leaps based off of, like, found materials, like leaps in information technology or material science or stuff like that?
No, he didn't give us that.
Okay.
That basically required a WUSAP clearance, and we
Okay.
only had TSSCI.
What
And
do you, let me ask you in a different way.
so
What do you think?
he couldn't answer that question.
But what do you personally think? Like, if you had to guess, do you think any of the technology that we now use on a daily basis may have an extraterrestrial or unknown origin?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So I do know that Jim Lackatski told Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp in a video that was an oral history interview that they did with him, 2 months ago now. And he did mention something about a triangular craft. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I don't remember if he said the word anti-gravity, but he did say a triangular craft. And that I thought implicated a reverse engineering success or inferred one. That's the first I've ever heard of it. And I haven't got his last 2 volumes or his 2 books.
Yeah, I haven't read them either.
So I haven't got those. So
They're
I
quite
have to
dense.
get those to find out where he talks about the triangular craft. But he made it sound like we built it. It wasn't a conventional jet engine or rocket engine or super
I didn't
advanced
pick up
jet
on
engine,
that,
rocket
yeah.
engine. I think he was alluding to this was derived from alien technology. And up until the time, okay, let's edit that part out.
Yeah.
So up until the time that senior VP died in 2018, I was always told they have not made advances. The only thing they understood was the fabrication approach that was taken to assemble the materials that created the various pieces and parts of this craft that they were given access to study, for study. And they understood that this material was built from the atomic level up. And I asked him, well, so you mean they're manipulating atom by atom? And he said, absolutely. They figured out using all of their advanced tools at their company that the materials they were looking at were constructed atom by atom. And I said, so have you reproduced that fabrication technique? He said, no. And by early 2018, when I last spoke to him, that was still the answer, is he said, I hadn't made any more advances. But yet, Jim Lackatski. But see, I don't believe for a minute that the senior VP knew Lackatski. We made him aware of Lackatski because we were under contract to him for the AAWSAP.
And give a little background on Jim Lackatski, because he's another, he's
got a doctorate of engineering, and he, my recollection is he was a missiles engineer, I believe.
Yeah.
That was his expertise.
Yeah. And he was a DIA
Defense
scientist,
Intelligence Agency. He was career.
And he, by his own admission, apparently had some other contractor, or was it intelligence agency, had the craft that he allegedly breached the hull.
That was the other intelligence agency.
Okay. So he eventually revealed in a weaponized interview that he apparently
that they opened it up. They managed. He was there when they managed to open it up, and he was invited to go inside and look around. And he described he didn't describe what he saw, but he described what was missing, and what they didn't see, I should say. And
what they didn't see was like any traditional kinds of controls, right?
No, it was they didn't. Were not able to identify any meaningful power and propulsion system.
Okay.
But what this is you're officially allowed to tell us that the United States government has in its possession a craft of unknown origin, and you are able to access the inside. Is that correct?
The wording that you read is correct. You're going beyond the wording.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you, did that meeting happen? And is it true? And it's true.
Yes.
Okay, so you're telling us, you told us, because you were allowed to tell us, that our government has a UFO in its possession and has been able to access the inside of it, right?
Yes.
And with the propulsion system, you have to have a power system. And you have to have a power system to power the craft overall, not just the propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't identify any such thing inside. So that tells me that had WWII clearance, and what's funky about that is that we worked with him from the inception of this, starting in 2007. It got started in 2008. We got our clearances in early, like January and through February 2009. And, actually December 2008 through February 2009. And all the way until the project closed down with the end of the DHS's bickering and terrible deliberations over whether they were going to take the placeholder SAP called Kona Blue, which was just a temporary, it was a PSAP, Provisional Special Access Program. That's a PSAP. And turned it into a full-fledged SAP. So we've gone through all that with him, and he didn't mention one single thing about getting access to the craft at the other 3-letter agency, getting to see it opened and going inside of it to look around. Never squeaked a peep to us. But yet, Hal, Bigelow, Kelleher, and myself, we all had our different interactions with that senior VP of that big aerospace company. And we reported that to Lackatski. So Lackatski knew what our encounters were with that guy and what his information was about all this at the TSSCI level. And then he knew during the following years, long after, where I kept contact with that senior VP after he retired even, and would visit him once or twice every year. We'd have long drives out into the countryside, actually out to the California coast, to avoid being surveilled, because he told me that his company was well known for their security surveilling former employees to make sure they're not violating their SF-312 and their company's NDA. And so he was worried about that. So that's why he said, we won't talk in a restaurant when we have dinner or lunch or wherever we're going to do that, to dine. We're going to talk about this on the car where I've got a reasonable assurance that we're not being surveilled.
Wow.
Okay, so
these days, good thing it wasn't a modern car.
Yeah, so he didn't tell me that he knew Lackatski or had communicated with Lackatski, but he's a guy that worked on the crash retrieval materials from that same 3-letter agency during the Cold War.
Interesting.
For more than a decade.
First of all, I'm very envious.
So
I wish I could have spoken with him.
Yeah, it's interesting that Lackatski knew everything we reported about. So during that period, I said before and after he retired, that information I generated, gave to Hal. Hal was sent off to Lackatski, and probably Bigelow and Kelleher as well. Okay, so Lackatski was always getting information on my one-on-one meetings with that senior VP, and he didn't volunteer to give us feedback on it, saying, "Oh, well, I got some
it is strange.
good stuff." Okay, you know why? It's because the senior VP was skirting the borderline between TSSCI and TSWWSAP. That's what he was doing. And with me privately, he just went over that line a little bit.
So basically, you guys had
hang on.
Yeah.
So hang on. So privately, in a car on the coastal highway, he would go over that edge a little bit and give me some more, dangle some more to me. But Lackatski's getting reports on that from us, and he's not giving us feedback of, I know all about that senior VP. I know what he was doing. It was either him I was interacting with or his replacement guy. No, you know what? I think Lackatski, I don't remember when Lackatski said what period this was that he got inside of you.
I don't recall off the top of my head either.
Yeah.
But to just
it could have been either during the AAWSAP, after, it could have been before the AAWSAP for all we know. So
you guys had
all
up
I
to
know is
TSSCI.
Lackatski's not giving feedback on that
Yeah.
senior VP
Yeah.
and saying, "Yep, I know all
Yeah.
about it."
So you guys have up to TSSCI clearance, which is a very high level of clearance. But then you're saying that this other person,
that the senior VP
had an even
Yeah, the
WWSAP level,
TS
which is
WWSAP.
like waived unacknowledged special access program, which is an even higher, more compartmentalized level.
Yeah, it actually goes this way.
So you guys had a very high level, but not in that specific area where he had more knowledge than you. Yeah.
It's just what your need to know allows you to.
Yes.
So it could be need to know this part of it, need to know that part of it. There were several subcompartments. I think maybe the top level guy who has the portfolio over that crash retrieval program with maybe a number of compartments and a bunch of subcompartments, he'll know what's going on.
So
but everybody working within those won't know about the other subcompartments. They're not allowed to. They're stovepiped.
I want to point out another really special area of interest for me and for a lot of people who watch the channel, which is that this senior VP, we already mentioned, he has these esoteric interests, right? And these interests in consciousness and psi and, Blavatsky and like Rosicrucianism and all this kind of stuff. And then Lackatski also often brings up consciousness and that it's very central to this phenomenon. He also talks about human potential in sort of a
human potential is psychic. That's the official technical military term for psychic phenomena.
Yeah.
They call it human potentials because it makes it palatable to those naysayers and
don't want to use
people
that.
with narrow minds and cognitive dissonance that this isn't a card reading or a crystal ball reading type venture.
Yeah.
This is real science.
So
they call it human potentials to cover up what it really is.
And
in order to make it palatable.
Right. And Lackatski says things like, if we really understood what our true potential was, we wouldn't be, I don't remember exactly what he said. We wouldn't be afraid or, I don't know. He says things to that effect. So it again brings into, right to the center of the conversation, consciousness, maybe capacities we don't realize we have, but also that it's central to the phenomenon somehow. What is your reading on that? How does this super advanced technology and consciousness, what is the nexus there if you had to try to guess or explain
Probably the NHIs figured out how to expand their consciousness to develop their remote viewing capabilities or psychic human potentials. And to a level where they could do mind matter interface or mind machine interfacing. We've already been doing that now at the most rudimentary level, where you put a device over, some sensors over a pilot's head, and the sensor is recording his brainwaves. And he has the intention on moving a mouse cursor on a Windows or Apple computer mentally. He's not connected up to he's not connected.
And we've been
up to
doing
the
this for
keyboard or the
decades.
Huh?
This is decades old at this point. So
So they're moving mouse cursors around on the monitor mentally. And then I think, where are we at now? Are they playing video games or typing? I think the last I've read is people are actually typing words and sentences out mentally.
Well, who knows? I mean, I don't know, on a classified level, but even, with Elon Musk's Neuralink, there's people who have degenerative brain diseases who are like Lou Gehrig's type diseases where they're unable to move. They can interact completely with all of their digital. They can play games, they can write, they can speak through, different software. So it's come quite a long way, even in the public facing realm. And I think there's even been things shown on next generation fighter pilot type levels where you can use a brain to computer interface to somehow enhance your ability to fly fighter jets and stuff like that.
So I think the NHIs took it a light year beyond us, or several light years beyond us, where I think it's human potential, psychic power, probably just telepathies, telekinesis, psychokinesis, the ability to move things mentally without the transference of energy. And they developed it. That was because of the way they evolved in their environment. It was a survival tool that developed in their brains, and they exploited it to the max. I think we had an element of that in human history. I outlined that for a classified workshop I attended at the Miter Corporation in October 2005, but my presentation on that was unclassified, but I had to go into a skiff to give that presentation because the rest of the workshop was all classified. And so I brought that up.
Was it all about psi, or was it like various different things?
No, the workshop was other stuff.
Okay.
I was specifically asked by the Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense to give this talk because they had read my AFRL teleportation physics study. And in chapter 5, I talked about the DIA analysis of China's experiments with gifted psychic children, where they were able to physically teleport animate and inanimate objects from
I've heard about this.
laboratory sealed test tubes that were locked away in one vault, like a skiff vault. They had high-speed cameras taking data, other sensors taking data, and the cameras.
And do you think that was real? You think those were real?
Those were real.
Wow.
Hal Puthoff went out there to meet those scientists under DIA sponsorship to find out if those are real. And so the DIA wrote extensive reports on it. So they basically published in their peer review literature, and Hal was able to demonstrate, was able to convince himself that these were not charlatans. They were not playing magic tricks and hoaxing everybody. This was a legitimate peer review journal. It wasn't low class. It wasn't marginal. It was high class, and it was funded by their Aerospace, by the People's Liberation Army's Aerospace Institute and Aerospace Medicine Institute. So you don't get funding for that on junk.
Right.
Okay. So because even they have standards, scientific standards. So so basically you see the contents of the test tubes vanish and reappear anywhere from a few feet away in a vault, in another vault that's sealed, in another sealed test tube-like container or flask in that other skiff vault. And the cameras and sensors are in there are observing it appear inside that sealed container.
Wow.
And then they separate them further and further, and then they got to the AM and FM microtransmitters. And that was very interesting because at the time they would disappear, the radio receivers, because these transmitters were receiving a signal, the laboratory receivers in the lab were detecting the signals getting weaker and weaker and weaker in correlation with what you would expect from a transmitter that's moving away from the receiver, and it's far away with the 1/r squared radio wave intensity drop-off, field intensity drop-off that you would expect. So it's the 1/r squared distance between the transmitter and receiver of the intensity of the radio wave falling. And so that meant it went off at a far distance, and then they started detecting it getting stronger as it materialized into the other sealed chamber and with the materializing into the sealed container that was contained in the sealed vault chamber. And so they did some calculations. Their best estimate was that these kids were teleporting these things through other space dimensions.
Wow.
That's the only thing they could conclude.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, I've heard of this, and I've seen there are some declassified documents out there on it that you can find in like the CIA reading
DIA
room and stuff.
declassified.
DIA declassified. It's probably in the CIA reading room, but it's DIA documents.
Yeah.
But we're down to our last few minutes here. So there's so many directions we've gone and so many more directions we could go. But just knowing we're down to our last few minutes, are there any final stories or things you want to bring up before we have to wrap it up?
Oh, I can't think of any, but for Avi Loeb and his UAP Science Advisory Council, I would have to say what I saw was scientific data, not hearsay.
Yeah.
Okay, it was scientific data.
Right.
And
this is a new development.
Evidence. I've actually seen the collected evidence of a crash retrieval in a foreign country. And it is very real. There are methods you used, are called tradecraft in the intelligence business, to be able to separate propaganda, disinformation from real data or real information. So that this evidence I was given had gone through those filters, had been examined top to bottom, and ascertained to be not disinformation propaganda, or disinformation / propaganda.
Yeah.
It was, and the nature of how it was acquired and transmitted to the United States already guaranteed that. And I can't even discuss that because that's one of the 3-letter agency's most secret of all secrets, is how you do human intelligence. So they've already done all that. They know the individual who was involved. They vetted him up and down, and that individual was a scientist of huge stature, and he was not being manipulated by any outside forces. He just basically pilfered files and photographs and records out and brought it to our agencies. And they had their internal science review boards look through it, their analysts look through it, but they didn't have a lot of background in this that I did at a level that they were, confident as checking the box that this is good. We agree with our conclusion on it. No, they wanted an outside independent assessor.
Yeah.
And I was working with the AAWSAP at the time, and they chose me because I'm already cleared.
Yeah.
So I'm already cleared at a TSSCI level. This was not WWII level, but the human intelligence, the 3-letter agency does it. It is probably a WWII, although they have a different category of intelligence.
And this
clearance
is
for it.
this is
But
a
anyway,
crash that I think.
they were satisfied. I satisfied myself it was legitimate, so I saw the actual data.
Yeah.
And I saw it in the original foreign language. I saw the English translations of it, so I could read it and study it.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal. It really captured my attention even more than the woman that I interviewed and came into interaction with at the other aerospace company during the 90s.
Well, maybe this would be good fodder for part 2, my friend, because there's so much more, but this has been fantastic. It's gone all over the place in an awesome, awesome way. I heard you talk about some things I've never heard you talk about before. So thank you for your time, man. Thank you for coming down here.
You're welcome, man.
I can't wait to put this out.
Good to be here.
Thanks, man.
All right.